Episode 12, Collateral. So, apparently, after the group was knocked out at Hawkman's funeral, they were all put inside the Matrix, and now it's up to Chloe to get them out. Dear Lord, I wish I was exaggerating here. This episode is trying so hard to be the Matrix, it hurts. Except that the original Matrix used state-of-the-art special effects that still hold up today, while Smallville's attempts to rip it off look shitty even by 90s standards. And while it's good to finally see Chloe return, by the time she pulled out a pair of handguns and started shooting people in the most overdramatic, stylized way the show could try to get away with, I wanted to puke on my TV. One thing that strikes me as odd is that apparently there's a portal back to the real world located in mid-air, just off to the side of the Daily Planet, and to go through it, you have to jump off the roof of the building. Chloe explains that anyone can use the portal, but you have to believe it's there or you'll die. That makes no sense. You can still walk through a door without having to believe that it's there. Or, since the show is trying so hard to rip off the Matrix, let's use that as an example. Remember when Neo took the red pill and he started turning silver and then he woke up in his pod in the real world? He didn't have time to comprehend anything that was happening, let alone believe in it, but he was still able to get out. Oh, but Chloe also explains that when a skydiver's parachute fails, it's not the impact that kills them, it's the heart attack the diver has because they know they're about to die. Bull fucking shit. Yes, it's true that there have been cases where skydivers' chutes have failed and they survived, but those instances were far from normal and they could hardly be attributed to the divers simply believing that they were going to survive. In fact, all these survivors have stated in interviews that they knew they were going to die when their parachutes didn't open and they had no idea why they were still alive. So fuck you! Anyway, she gets everyone out one at a time, and they all have to fight their way through a team of VRA agents. Apparently, Chloe took control of the Suicide Squad, which I have to admit is a pretty neat twist. But again, it looks like Green Arrow is still wearing the sunglasses and using the voice changer when he suits up. Why? He already went public with his identity! Everyone already knows who he is! Oh, fuck it, let's just move on. Episode 13, Beacon. The episode starts out with Clark finally wearing his costume again, until he remembers that he's allergic to being a superhero and changes back into his regular clothes. So for those keeping score, we're at episode 13, he's had his new costume since episode 2, and the only thing he's actually done in it was rescue Lois from an explosion in episode 7. You know, I gave them a lot of credibility with the new costume. At the very least, I felt like it was more appropriate than the trench coat from last season. But it can only go so far if all he ever does is pose in it. I'm getting really fucking sick of these moments where they put him in the costume for 10 seconds and don't actually give him anything to do. Anyway, we get a welcome return from Martha Kent as she's now campaigning to repeal the VRA. She gives a decent enough speech up until she starts hooting and hollering with the crowd at the end. And almost on cue, she gets shot. Clark meets her at the hospital, but she's fine. Turns out the first shot was stopped by a bulletproof vest and the second shot grazed her arm. Clark flashes out of the room to go investigate the scene. Couple of notes about this. First of all, Martha's arm is visibly bleeding. She's in the hospital and she's already been treated. Why wouldn't they put a bandage over that? Second, Clark had to talk to a security guard to get into the room, but he used his super speed to leave. Wouldn't the guard get suspicious if he looked into the room later? Like, hey, your son was just in here. Where did he go? It's like he just blurred out of here. Hey, is your son the Blur? Anyway, it turns out that Alexander was the shooter, and he was using kryptonite bullets, counting on Clark to show up and protect his mother. Alexander is now a very angry-looking teenager, but it's okay because Lionel is back to help. Oh goody, this is gonna be fun! Lionel uses his influence to take back his company and his mansion and intends to raise Alexander to be his successor. Too bad Alexander has all of Lex's memories and all of them involving Lionel make him want to kill the guy. And he attempts to do just that, knocking out Lionel and burning down the mansion. No! Where will the X-Men go to school now? Clark and Tess try to reason with Alexander, convincing him that he's a different person from Lex, at least until Michael Rosenbaum returns later this season, and that he doesn't have to be the psychotic killer that his predecessor was. Clark lets the Luthor mansion burn, but reluctantly saves Lionel. And as the episode ends, we get one heck of a twist as it seems that Alexander might actually have some of Clark's DNA. There are so many different directions this can go in, and it all seems awesome. Episode 14, Masquerade. This episode opens up with Chloe meeting Oliver for a date. Oliver's doing his best Nightshade impression to keep from drawing too much attention. So when the hostess comes to seat them, he takes off his shades to reveal his face, but leaves on his coat and fedora for some reason. Yeah, cause that doesn't look conspicuous. They take a table under the assumed names of Mr. and Ms. Jones. And at first, I kinda thought Chloe had made a reservation with that name, but it turns out there really is a Ms. Jones, and she calls Oliver right before she's murdered. Wait, so rather than make a reservation with a fake name, they decide it's a better idea to steal someone else's table away? Wow, and one of them's being killed right now. I bet you feel like a couple of dicks. They leave to investigate the strange phone call, but they get kidnapped in the process. Meanwhile, Lois is getting on Clark's case about keeping his identity safe. It seems he's been getting a bit careless lately, and people have been getting video evidence of the blur in other countries. Lois even took it upon herself to pull one of Clark's stories about the VRA being repealed, since it would have put a picture of his full, undisguised face right on the front page. This is especially a good point when you remember that the top people behind the VRA already know what the blur looks like. And almost as if the show itself is voicing one of the issues I've had ever since Clark moved to Metropolis, Clark spends most of the episode going around with everyone around him already knowing who he is. And at the end of the episode, Clark himself even says that he's been going about this dual identity business completely wrong from the beginning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Chloe and Oliver are presumably being driven to their deaths, with them smiling and yucking it up the entire time. Yeesh, way to diffuse any tension or drama the scene might have had. They eventually knock out their kidnappers and find out they were actually FBI agents. It turns out Mr. and Ms. Jones were actually undercover agents themselves, and Chloe and Oliver are being suspected in their disappearance. Gee, I guess that's another reason you shouldn't take someone else's dinner reservation, you assholes. The Joneses were investigating Desaad, so Chloe and Oliver decide to do their own investigation, and Desaad kidnaps Chloe. He goes into her mind and tries to tempt her with visions of her friends and loved ones playing to her weaknesses. And I really have to give the writers credit here. The scene could have been cliché in so many ways, but thankfully Chloe never becomes conveniently stupid for the sake of the plot. She realizes what's going on and doesn't give in to any of Desaad's tricks. Desaad's about to kill her when Clark shows up, finally wearing his hero jacket in action again. Desaad laments that Clark is different this time and can no longer be corrupted. I still argue that he was incorruptible before, but whatever. And he captures Clark in a wave of dark energy while making his getaway. Outside, Desaad runs into Oliver, who, unlike Clark, is still angry and corruptible, so he baits Oliver into trying to kill him. Clark gets free and tries to stop Oliver, but it's too late, and he now has the biggest Omega symbol in the history of the show painted on his forehead. And in the end, Clark finally makes the decision to put on the glasses and change his attitude so that people will be less likely to recognize him as a superhero. I'm sorry, but no. I'm glad that they're finally acknowledging this, but the episode even demonstrates that he's been in Metropolis too long and he's too well known to instantly change his identity like this. It just doesn't work that way. People need time to adjust to a change in appearance and attitude. This is something that needed to happen a long time ago. Oh, but just to illustrate that I'm apparently supposed to be wrong about this, Clark walks out of the office and bumps into a guy who was earlier established as a simpering yes man, and upon seeing Clark, he immediately starts apologizing for being so clumsy. Clark then offers his own apology, insisting that it was his own fault and that he'll try to look where he's going from now on. And then, in the most awkward character shift I've ever seen, the apologetic coworker immediately changes his tone and says, "Yeah, maybe you should, fucking dickhead." Nope. This is not how people treat each other. If the guy was already accustomed to showing a certain amount of respect to Clark, he would not instantly turn around and treat him like a jerk just because Clark apologized when they bumped into each other. Now overall, this was actually a decent episode, and it took an important step in moving Clark closer to his destiny, but that's why scenes like this stand out even more, because it just feels so ridiculous by comparison. And it really doesn't help that every transition to a commercial break tries to copy the musical cue from Lost. Seriously, it's the same music. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they're ripping it off. But even that is forgivable compared to what happens next.